Grayson Grundhoefer with us, 365 Sports, also co-host with Craig, the Bearcast on Tuesdays when it is released. Grayson, thanks for your time. I know there's some things in the premium section that need to be what is said in the premium section or written there stays there, but can you touch on the story involving the Alito quarterback and the interest and what kind of player he is?
Yeah, so it's one of those kind of more recent developments, I would say, because Baylor, towards the very beginning of February when the dead period started, they actually offered two quarterbacks on the same day. And so Haas Haney was one of them. He's the quarterback out of Alito. The other was Deuce Adams, who's out of New Braunfels Canyon High School. And so both those guys are squarely on Baylor's radar. Deuce is actually visiting next weekend, and then Haas isn't going to visit until April. But yeah, so basically, Haas Haney is a kid who I've gotten to talk to recently, but has been a big name in high school football over the last year. Obviously, Alito, making that run to a state championship. Haas was the MVP of the district as well. Really good athlete, 10.68 in the 100-meter is his PR, and that was as a sophomore. So very, very fast. Has a very good arm, too. If you watch, kind of the things that he can do, the throws that he can make, you can clearly tell, he's a very good quarterback. The only knock on him is that he's about 5'11", 180 pounds. So the height, not great, but when you talk about, guys playing in college, you don't necessarily need to be the biggest guy. And he actually reminds me a lot of a quarterback who Baylor's actually going to play this year in UCF's John Rice Plumlee. He really reminds me of him, just their ability to run the football while also being, very good passers as well. But yeah, he's a very accomplished kid. He had over 2,000 yards passing, 20 touchdowns, and then on the ground, nearly 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. So really good player who has a lot of interest in Baylor, despite the fact that he's committed to Duke currently.
Grayson, who do you think will be the transfer that we see the most immediate impact from in the spring and maybe notice the most?
Wow. That's actually a great question. I think that a lot of times we overlook offensive linemen. And so therefore I think, while we'll notice them, I don't think they're going to get the headlines that maybe some of the other guys will. So I'm going to go with Ketron Jackson and the wide receiver transfer out of Arkansas. This was a guy that Arkansas was planning on being their number one receiver going into this season, and instead he decided to transfer out. And Baylor was able to land him, and he was a guy Arkansas absolutely did not want to leave their program, and he was like, you know what, I haven't been getting the opportunities that I need. I want to go back to Texas. So Baylor gets him, and now I think he's going to be the best receiver on this football team next year. And I do think that's kind of saying a lot, as Hal Presley's another year in. Monterey Baldwin has been the most productive. But I really, really think that Ketron Jackson's going to have a huge impact. And I think a lot of people will notice that, because I do think the wide receiver position was criticized a ton last year. So it'll definitely be a focal point in the spring.
Grayson, can you kind of just update everybody on where we are in the recruiting calendar? I think for people on the site, we're just constantly, hit with news, and so we're always keeping track of it. But where are we sort of in the process of the recruiting class of 2024 as we start to enter spring ball and things like that opening up?
Right. So the dead period just ended. So March is going to be a time where you'll see visitors at Baylor. You'll also see visitors in April as well. But this is also a time where you're going to see Baylor kind of be patient on how many guys they actually bring in on visit at this moment. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of times they're going to want to wait till the end of the month when the spring game is happening and when, spring practices begin so the players can come and visit, of course. So currently 3 commits. This is a period where you'll see a lot of visitors kind of in and out on campus. And then this is also a time where Baylor kind of needs to figure out, okay, summer's right around the corner, and who are the guys that we want to invite to take official visits, and who are the priority guys in this class, especially as they're still trying to, figure out, how many spots are we going to have available, how many guys are going to transfer out after the spring, things like that. But this is a time period, I think, in general, where it's building relationships, getting guys on campus, and then figuring out who you want to be official visitors when those do happen in the summer. I will also say, on next weekend on Sunday is Under Armour's camp, and that's going to be a big one as well as they send out, testing times and results and things like that to schools. So that's a great opportunity for Baylor to kind of see, what guys have made improvements on their times, who are really, hidden gems that are really good athletes. A great time for that. So I think you'll see more offers come after next weekend.
Grayson, there's the realignment conferences, the Pac-12 deal or lack of one, all that is going to be out there, and who knows when it ever gets settled. But let's say that somehow or another that the Big 12 ends up with 4 schools, as the ones that have been mentioned are Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State. Does that change in any way how Baylor would look west when it comes to recruiting?
I think that is a very good question, but I would also say that I think Baylor's already kind of done that. Now, it's been very specific, right? It's been very much Arizona and Utah. So maybe they're able to kind of shift gears, look into California more, maybe Colorado, things like that. But I do believe in general, since Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos got to Baylor, a lot of things have changed on that front as far as their recruiting philosophy, going out to the West Coast. And so I think it could become even more a part of what they're doing. But I think in general, this is a Baylor program that's going to rely on in-state recruiting and then find the connections that they have out of the state. And so I think so far we've already seen the connections that they have. I think that A.J. Stewart brings even more connection out west. And so, yeah, I think you could see an expanded approach there, but maybe not necessarily just because of the teams they add, maybe more so just because of the guys that they have on staff.
Yeah, I've always been kind of surprised that they have a California head coach and they haven't quite hit that yet, but I know he's been gone a bit. But I would think that would have to maybe be phase 3 of the recruiting super plan, is to grab a couple kids out of Cali every year.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you kind of got to wait on that, right? Just because of the fact that, you want to hit on the guys that you have in the state. And so until you have a guy in California that is like, hey, I know this head coach, I have a good relationship, I know that he has interest in coming to Baylor, I know that we have a fit for him. I think it just becomes a whole lot of questions when you go out of state. It's got to be the perfect fit. It seems like that's kind of at least been Baylor's approach over the last few years. It's got to be just this ideal perfect fit and a kid who really wants to be at Baylor.
Grayson, here we are at the tail end of this segment, so I'll just throw one more at you before we go here and turn to the basketball side of things. I mean, we'll have plenty of football coming up here over the next few weeks with spring ball opening up, but you and I also talk some basketball on the Bearcast, and just what are your thoughts on Scott Drew and the men, their positioning? Obviously some injuries this past week, but what do you think of where they sit entering this final weekend and this final regular season game against Iowa State?
I think they're in a great spot. I think if you look at kind of what happened this week and the fact that Texas lost to TCU, they're now tied with K-State. Kansas has kind of separated themselves, which is fine because Baylor still has a shot to get the number 2 seed in the Big 12 tournament because Baylor's got the game against Iowa State. But then you look at the other teams, Kansas State has to go on the road to Morgantown and face the West Virginia team that's kind of in a must-win mode. Because if they win that game, they're probably in the NCAA tournament. So that's going to be tough. And then Texas, of course, has to play Kansas. So if those two teams lose and Baylor wins, I mean, they're going to be the 2 seed in the Big 12 tournament, which would be a fantastic turnaround from starting 0-3 in the Big 12. So I've been impressed by them. I think that they're going to find a way to come out and get at this win against Iowa State. Iowa State's kind of a team that's really they're in free fall right now. And so I expect Baylor to take advantage of that. Find a way to win that game and finish 23-8, 12-6 in conference. And I think by the end of Saturday, I think they're going to be the 2 seed in the Big 12 tournament.
Grayson, thank you very much. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com on Fridays with us about recruiting and also opinions on what's going on at the time, including, as Craig brought up, the men's basketball team.